The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the downtown community center as 12-year-old Alex quietly made his way to his usual spot in the corner. His backpack, containing everything he owned in the world, sat beside him like a faithful companion. The shoes on his feet had seen better days, with small holes that his mother Lisa had carefully covered with tape to keep the rain out. But Alex never complained. He had learned early that complaining wouldn't change their situation. Lisa worked at a diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then rushed across town to clean offices until late at night. Every dollar she earned went toward their basic needs, but it still wasn't enough for rent. 3 months ago, they had received the eviction notice that changed everything. Alex still remembered that day clearly. His mother had sat at their small kitchen table, holding the paper with shaking hands, trying to explain to him that they would have to leave their home. "It's just temporary, sweetheart," she had told him, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll figure something out soon." But temporary had stretched into weeks, and weeks had turned into months. They moved from one shelter to another, following the rules and schedules that governed their daily lives. Alex had become an expert at packing quickly, at staying quiet during the day, and at making friends with other children who understood what it meant to carry your whole life in a bag. The community center had become Alex's sanctuary during the long hours while his mother worked. The staff were kind, and they served lunch to anyone who needed it. Alex had made friends with Mr. Rodriguez, the janitor, who always had a smile and sometimes shared stories about his own childhood. There was also Miss Chen, who ran the after-school program and helped kids with their homework. What Alex loved most about the community center was the sense of normalcy it provided. Here, surrounded by other children playing games and doing activities, he could almost forget about their difficult circumstances. He could pretend, just for a few hours, that he was like any other kid who would go home to his own room and his own bed at the end of the day. But there was something else that drew Alex to this place, something he hadn't told anyone about, not even his mother. Near the back of the main room, tucked away behind some storage boxes, he had discovered an old piano. It was covered with a dusty sheet and clearly hadn't been used in years. The wood was scratched, and some of the keys looked yellowed with age. But to Alex, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He had first noticed it 2 weeks ago when he was helping Mr. Rodriguez move some chairs. The sheet had slipped slightly, revealing the elegant curve of the piano's lid. Alex's heart had started beating faster, and he found himself walking toward it as if drawn by an invisible force. He had always loved music, though he had never had the chance to learn an instrument. When they lived in their apartment, he used to listen to classical music on his mother's old radio, closing his eyes and imagining what it would feel like to create such beautiful sounds. Every day since then, Alex had found excuses to walk past the covered piano. Sometimes he would glance around to make sure no one was watching, then gently touch the sheet, imagining the keys beneath. He wondered what the piano would sound like, whether all the keys still worked, and what songs might be hiding inside, waiting for someone to discover them. During quiet moments, when the other children were focused on their activities, Alex would sit near the piano and move his fingers in the air, pretending to play melodies that existed only in his imagination. He had watched videos on the computers at the center, studying how pianists moved their hands, trying to understand the magic of how pressing keys could create music that made people feel so many different emotions. His mother had noticed his fascination with music. Sometimes, when they were walking through downtown, Alex would stop outside the music store windows, pressing his face against the glass to watch the instruments inside. Lisa would stand beside him, watching her son's face light up with wonder and longing. She wished more than anything that she could give him piano lessons, or even just a small keyboard to practice on. But those dreams felt as distant as the moon. "Maybe someday," she would whisper to herself, not wanting Alex to hear the sadness in her voice. Alex understood their situation better than his mother realized. He had learned to read the worry lines on her face, to recognize when she was calculating expenses in her head, and to know when money was particularly tight by the way she would skip meals to make sure he had enough to eat. He had stopped asking for things he wanted because he could see how much it hurt her to say no. Instead, He had learned to find joy in simple things. He loved the way music played in the lobby of the community center, usually soft instrumental pieces that created a peaceful atmosphere. He would sit and listen, trying to pick out individual instruments and understand how they worked together to create harmony. Sometimes he would hum along quietly, creating his own melodies to accompany the music. The other children at the center knew Alex as the quiet boy who was always kind and helpful. He never got into fights, always shared his snacks, and had a way of making younger children feel better when they were sad. What they didn't know was that music played constantly in his head. He heard rhythms in everyday sounds, melodies in conversations, and harmonies in the noise of the city outside. At night, lying on the narrow cot at whatever shelter they were staying in, Alex would close his eyes and imagine himself sitting at a grand piano. In his dreams, his fingers would dance across the keys, creating music that told stories without words. He would play songs that spoke of hope, of love, of the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. In these dreams, his mother would sit in the front row, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched her son share his gift with the world. But when morning came, Alex would wake up to the reality of their situation. He would help his mother pack their few belongings, eat breakfast at the shelter, and make his way to the community center for another day of waiting, hoping and dreaming. The covered piano continued to call to him, its presence both a source of comfort and longing. Alex didn't know that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. He didn't know that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the deepest struggles, or that talent has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. For now, he was simply a 12-year-old boy with a secret dream. Sitting in the corner of a community center, his fingers moving silently through the air as he played songs that only he could hear. Little did he know that very soon the whole world would hear his music, and nothing would ever be the same again. The following Tuesday arrived with an unusual buzz of activity at the community center. Alex noticed it the moment he walked through the front doors. Volunteers were everywhere, carrying boxes, rearranging furniture, and hanging colorful banners from the ceiling. The normally quiet space hummed with energy and purpose. "What's happening today?" Alex asked Miss Chen as she hurried past with an armload of folded tablecloths. "Oh, Alex!" "Perfect timing," she said, pausing to catch her breath. "We're setting up for our monthly fundraising event tonight. The community comes together to support our programs, and we always try to make it special. Would you like to help us set up?" Alex's face lit up. He loved feeling useful, and any chance to contribute made him feel less like someone who only took help and more like someone who could give something back. "Yes, I'd love to help." "What can I do?" Miss Chen pointed toward the main room where several volunteers were struggling with something large and awkward. "Actually, we could really use some extra hands over there. Mr. Thompson donated his old piano and we're trying to move it into position for tonight." Alex's heart nearly stopped. A piano. They were bringing a piano into the room. His feet seemed to move on their own as he walked toward the group of volunteers. There it was, even more beautiful than the covered one he had been admiring from afar. This piano was a rich, dark wood color with brass pedals that caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. "Careful with that corner," called out Mrs. Davies, one of the regular volunteers. She was a retired teacher who had been helping at the community center for over 10 years. Her gray hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she had the kind of smile that made everyone feel welcome. Alex approached the group quietly. "Excuse me," he said in his polite voice that his mother had taught him to use. "Miss Chen said you might need help moving the piano?" Mr. Wilson, a tall man with gentle eyes, looked down at Alex with surprise. "Well, aren't you thoughtful? We could definitely use another pair of hands. It's heavier than it looks." For the next hour, Alex worked alongside the volunteers, helping them position the piano perfectly in the center of the room. He was careful to follow their instructions exactly, but every few minutes, his eyes would drift to the keyboard. Even from a distance, he could see the smooth white and black keys, each one representing a different note, a different possibility. As they worked, Mrs. Davies chatted with Alex, asking him about school and his interests. She had a way of making conversation that felt natural and easy. "You seem very interested in this old piano. she observed as they took a break. Alex felt his cheeks warm up. "I've always loved music," he admitted quietly. "I listen to it whenever I can, but I've never had the chance to actually play anything." "Really?" Mrs. Davies's eyes sparkled with interest. "What kind of music do you like?" "All kinds, I guess. Classical music makes me feel peaceful, but I also like the songs they play on the radio. Sometimes I try to imagine what it would be like to create music instead of just listening to it." Mrs. Davies nodded thoughtfully. "Music is one of life's greatest gifts. It has a way of speaking to people's hearts without using any words at all." As the afternoon progressed, more volunteers arrived to help with the setup. Alex met Tom, a young college student who was studying social work, and Rita, a mother of 3 who volunteered whenever her schedule allowed. Everyone treated Alex like he belonged there, asking his opinion about table placement and thanking him genuinely for his help. The piano sat in its new position like a centerpiece, commanding attention even when no one was playing it. Alex found himself glancing at it constantly, wondering what songs might be waiting inside. During a quiet moment, when most of the volunteers were in the kitchen preparing refreshments, he found himself standing directly in front of the instrument. The keys looked so inviting, so full of potential. Alex reached out his hand, then hesitated. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, then gently pressed one key near the middle of the keyboard. A clear, sweet note rang out, more beautiful than he had imagined. His heart raced with excitement and nervousness. "That's a lovely sound, isn't it?" came a voice behind him. Alex spun around, expecting to be in trouble, but Mrs. Davies was smiling kindly at him. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to touch it without permission." "Oh, sweetheart, you don't need to apologize. Music is meant to be shared, not hidden away." She moved to stand beside him at the piano. "Mr. Thompson told me this piano has been sitting in his living room for years without anyone playing it. He said it made him sad to see such a beautiful instrument going to waste." Alex looked up at her with wonder. "Really? No one was playing it?" "His daughter used to play when she was younger, but she moved away for college and never came back. He thought it would be better to donate it somewhere where people could enjoy it again." Mrs. Davies ran her finger along the edge of the piano. "He specifically requested that we use it for our community events, so people could experience the joy of music." "It must have been so quiet in his house," Alex said softly, imagining the piano sitting silent and lonely. Mrs. Davies studied Alex's face for a moment. There was something about this polite, thoughtful boy that touched her heart. She had been working with children for over 40 years, and she had learned to recognize genuine passion when she saw it. "Alex, have you ever thought about learning to play?" "Every day," Alex answered honestly, then quickly added, "But I know it's expensive, and my mom already works so hard just to take care of us." The honesty in his voice made Mrs. Davies's heart ache. She had seen many children over the years who dreamed of opportunities they couldn't afford, but there was something special about Alex's quiet longing. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "tonight we're having our fundraising event, and we always like to have some entertainment. Usually someone plays the piano for our guests." Alex's eyes widened. "Someone's going to play tonight?" "Well, that was the plan, but our usual pianist had to cancel at the last minute. Her grandmother got sick and she had to travel out of town." Mrs. Davies paused, studying Alex's face. "I don't suppose you'd be interested in trying to play something for our guests?" Alex felt like his heart might beat right out of his chest. "Me? But I don't know how to play. I've never even touched a real piano before today." "Sometimes," Mrs. Davies said gently, "the most beautiful music comes from the heart, not from years of lessons. Would you like to try? Just for our small group tonight? It's only about 30 people, mostly families from the neighborhood." Alex looked at the piano, then back at Mrs. Davies. The opportunity seemed impossible, like something from one of his dreams. "What if I'm terrible? What if I embarrass everyone?" Mrs. Davies laughed softly. "Oh, honey, you could never embarrass us. Our community events are about bringing people together, not about perfect performances. Besides," she winked, "I have a feeling you might surprise yourself." Alex felt a mixture of terror and excitement that made his whole body feel electric. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. The event starts at 7 o'clock tonight. If you decide you'd like to try, just let me know." Mrs. Davies squeezed his shoulder gently. Sometimes we have to take chances on our dreams, even when we're scared. As Mrs. Davies walked away to help with other preparations, Alex stood alone in front of the piano. His mind raced with possibilities and fears. Could he really do this? Could he sit in front of real people and try to make music when he had never played before? He thought about his mother, working her second job and dreaming of better days for both of them. He thought about all the nights he had fallen asleep imagining himself playing beautiful music. Most of all, he thought about the feeling he had when he pressed that single key. How right it had felt, how much he wanted to discover what other sounds were waiting for him. The piano seemed to be waiting too, patient and full of promise. Tonight, Alex would have to decide whether to take the biggest chance of his young life. 7 o'clock arrived faster than Alex had ever imagined possible. The community center had transformed completely from the quiet place he knew during the day. Warm yellow lights cast a cozy glow over the room, and the smell of homemade cookies and coffee filled the air. Families were arriving in small groups, chatting and laughing as they found seats around the room. Alex sat in his usual corner, but tonight felt completely different. His stomach was doing somersaults, and his hands felt sweaty despite the cool evening air. He had spent the entire afternoon thinking about Mrs. Davies's invitation, going back and forth between excitement and pure terror. Every time he looked at the piano, now beautifully positioned in the center of the room with a small spotlight shining on it, his heart would start racing again. His mother, Lisa, had arrived just 20 minutes ago, tired from her long day at work, but smiling when she saw Alex. She had been surprised to find him at a community event instead of just waiting for her as usual. But she was happy to see him engaged with other people. Alex hadn't told her about the piano yet. He wasn't even sure he was going to go through with it. "There are more people here than I expected," Alex whispered to himself, counting the faces in the room. He could see families with small children, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers who had come with their parents, and several people he recognized as regular volunteers. Everyone looked so relaxed and happy, chatting with neighbors and enjoying the warm atmosphere. Mrs. Davies appeared at the front of the room, clapping her hands gently to get everyone's attention. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming to our monthly community gathering. Your support means everything to us and to all the families we serve." The room quieted down as people turned their attention to her. Alex felt his heart pounding even harder. Was she going to call his name? What if he chickened out? What if he made a fool of himself in front of all these people? "Tonight we have a very special treat," Mrs. Davies continued, her eyes scanning the room until they found Alex. "We have a young musician who has volunteered to share his gift with us. This is actually his first time playing piano in public, so let's give him all our encouragement." Alex felt like the room was spinning. This was it, the moment he had been dreaming about and dreading at the same time. He looked around at all the expectant faces, some curious, some smiling encouragingly. In the back of the room, he saw his mother's confused but proud expression. She didn't understand what was happening, but she could see that her son was about to do something important. "Alex?" Mrs. Davies called gently. "Would you like to come up?" The walk from his corner to the piano felt like it took forever, even though it was probably only 15 steps. Alex's legs felt shaky, and he was sure everyone could hear his heart beating. As he got closer to the piano, he could see the details more clearly. The smooth, polished surface of the keys, the way the wood grain caught the light, the brass pedals that seemed to glow gold in the spotlight. He sat down on the piano bench, which was exactly the right height for him. Someone had thought to adjust it earlier. The keys were right there in front of him, waiting. Alex placed his hands in his lap and looked out at the audience. 30 faces looked back at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to gentle encouragement. In the very back, he could see his mother sitting forward in her chair, her hand pressed to her heart. "Take your time, sweetie," Mrs. Davies said softly from beside the piano. "There's no pressure at all. Just let the music come from your heart." Alex took a deep breath and placed his hands on the keys. The moment his fingers touched the smooth surface, something incredible happened. All his nervousness seemed to flow out through his fingertips and into the piano. It was like the instrument was welcoming him, telling him that everything was going to be okay. He had no sheet music, no formal training, no idea what song he was going to play. But somehow, his hands seemed to know exactly what to do. He started with a single note, clear and sweet, just like the one he had pressed that afternoon. Then another note joined it, creating a simple harmony that made him smile. The room was completely silent except for the gentle sounds coming from the piano. Alex forgot about the audience, forgot about his nervousness, forgot about everything except the amazing feeling of creating music. His left hand found a simple bass pattern, while his right hand began to explore a melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. The music that emerged was unlike anything anyone in the room had ever heard from a beginner. It wasn't complicated or flashy, but it was pure and honest and beautiful. Alex played with an instinct that couldn't be taught, finding harmonies that made perfect sense, even though he had never learned the rules of music theory. As he continued to play, the melody began to tell a story. It spoke of loneliness and hope, of dreams that seemed impossible but refused to die. The music painted pictures of cold nights and warm embraces, of struggles that made you stronger, and love that kept you going when everything else fell apart. Without using a single word, Alex was telling the audience about his life, his mother's sacrifices, and his unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. In the audience, people began to react in ways they hadn't expected. Mrs. Chen, who ran the after-school program, felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She had known Alex was a special child, but she had never imagined he carried this kind of gift inside him. Mr. Rodriguez, the janitor who had become Alex's friend, sat with his mouth slightly open, amazed by what he was witnessing. Tom, the college student studying social work, pulled out his phone and started recording. Not for social media, but because he somehow knew this was a moment that needed to be preserved. Rita, the mother of 3, found herself thinking about her own children's dreams and how important it was to nurture them, even when times were tough. But it was Alex's mother, Lisa, who was experiencing the most profound reaction. She sat in the back of the room, tears streaming down her face, watching her 12-year-old son create magic with an instrument he had never properly played before. All those times she had seen him staring at pianos in store windows, all those moments when she had wished she could give him music lessons, all the guilt she had carried about not being able to provide him with opportunities, suddenly everything made sense. Her son didn't need expensive lessons or perfect conditions to share his gift. The music had been inside him all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. As she listened to the beautiful melody flowing from his small hands, Lisa realized that sometimes the most extraordinary talents come from the most ordinary circumstances. Alex continued to play, lost in the joy of finally expressing what had been locked inside his heart for so long. He had no idea that several people in the audience were crying, no idea that he was creating a memory that would stay with everyone in that room forever. He was simply a boy and a piano, making music together for the very first time. The song seemed to build naturally toward an ending, like a story that knew exactly how it wanted to conclude. As the final notes faded into silence, Alex lifted his hands from the keys and looked up at the audience with wonder in his eyes, as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. For a moment, the room remained completely silent, as if everyone was afraid to break the spell that Alex had created. Then slowly the applause began. The silence that followed Alex's performance lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then, like a dam breaking, the applause erupted from every corner of the room. But this wasn't ordinary clapping. People were standing up, some with tears still streaming down their faces, others shaking their heads in amazement as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Alex looked around the room in wonder, his small hand still resting on the piano keys. He had never seen adults cry from listening to music before, and he certainly never imagined that he could be the one to create such reactions. Mrs. Davies was the first to reach him, her own eyes misty as she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Alex, that was absolutely incredible," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "In all my years of organizing these events, I have never heard anything so beautiful." But the most important reaction came from the back of the room. Lisa had stood up during the applause, her hand pressed to her mouth as she tried to process what she had just experienced. Her son, her 12-year-old boy who had never had a music lesson in his life, had just played like someone who had been studying piano for years. The melody he had created was so filled with emotion and skill that it seemed impossible. As the applause finally began to quiet down, Alex stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs. People started moving toward him, but they approached slowly, almost reverently, as if they were approaching something sacred. The first person to reach him was an elderly man named Frank, who had been coming to these community events for over 5 years. "Son," Frank said, his voice trembling slightly, "I've been playing piano for 60 years, and I've never heard anything like what you just did. How long have you been playing?" Alex looked up at the kind man's face and answered honestly, "That was my first time ever playing a real piano, sir." Frank's eyes widened, and he turned to look at the other people gathering around them. "Did you hear that?" This was his first time. A murmur of amazement rippled through the small crowd that had formed around Alex. A woman named Dr. Rodriguez, who taught music at the local elementary school, pushed her way through the group. She had been sitting in the middle of the room during the performance, and about halfway through Alex's song, she had realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. "Alex, is it?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, kneeling down so she could look him in the eyes. "I'm a music teacher, and I need you to know that what you just did was remarkable. Most of my students who have been taking lessons for years couldn't play with the emotion and natural understanding that you just showed." Alex felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but also incredibly happy. "I've always loved music," he said quietly. "I just never had the chance to try making it before." "Well, you didn't just make music," said a voice from behind Dr. Rodriguez. It was Tom, the college student who had been volunteering at the center. He was holding his phone, and his expression was one of complete amazement. "You created something magical. I recorded part of your performance, and I hope that's okay, because people need to hear this." Lisa finally made her way through the crowd to reach her son. When Alex saw her approaching, his face lit up with the biggest smile anyone had seen from him all evening. "Mom, did you hear? Did you hear me play?" Lisa knelt down and pulled Alex into a tight hug, not caring that everyone was watching. "I heard every single note, sweetheart, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced in my entire life." Her voice broke slightly as she continued, "I had no idea you had this gift inside you." "I didn't know either," Alex admitted, looking back at the piano with wonder. "But when I sat down and put my hands on the keys, it felt like the music was already there, waiting for me to find it." Dr. Rodriguez listened to this exchange with growing excitement. She had been teaching music for 15 years, and she had learned to recognize true natural talent when she encountered it. What Alex had just demonstrated wasn't just raw ability, it was an intuitive understanding of music that couldn't be taught. It was the kind of gift that appeared maybe once in a generation. "Lisa, may I speak with you for a moment?" Dr. Rodriguez asked gently. "I'd like to discuss some opportunities for Alex." While Dr. Rodriguez pulled Lisa aside for a private conversation, other people continued to approach Alex. Rita, the mother of 3, sat down beside him on the piano bench. "My daughter takes piano lessons," she told him, "and she's been playing for 2 years. I'm going to tell her about you, about how music can come from the heart, even when you don't know all the technical stuff yet." An older woman named Beverly, who had been crying during the entire performance, approached with a tissue still in her hand. "Young man, your music reminded me of my late husband. He used to play piano, and the way you played just now with so much feeling, it brought back the most beautiful memories. Thank you for that gift." Alex was beginning to understand that his music had affected people in ways he never could have imagined. Each person who spoke to him shared how his performance had made them feel, and their reactions ranged from nostalgia to inspiration to pure joy. He realized that music wasn't just about creating pretty sounds. It was about connecting with other people's hearts and emotions. Meanwhile, Dr. Rodriguez was having an intense conversation with Lisa near the refreshment table. "I want to offer Alex free piano lessons," she was saying urgently. "I've never made this kind of offer before, but what I witnessed tonight was extraordinary. Your son has a natural gift that needs to be nurtured. Lisa's eyes filled with tears again. Dr. Rodriguez, I can't afford lessons. We're staying in shelters right now, and I'm working 2 jobs just to keep us fed. You don't understand, Dr. Rodriguez said, placing a gentle hand on Lisa's arm. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. I want to teach Alex for free because talents like his are rare and precious. It would be an honor for me to help him develop his abilities. Back at the piano, more people were gathering around Alex. Word of his performance was spreading quickly through the room, and even people who had been chatting in other areas were coming over to see what all the excitement was about. A local businessman named Mr. Kim approached the group looking thoughtful. "Excuse me," Mr. Kim said, addressing Mrs. Davies. "I couldn't help but overhear about this young man's situation. I own a music store downtown, and I have several keyboards that aren't selling. Would it be possible to donate one to Alex's family?" Mrs. Davies' face lit up. "Mr. Kim, that's incredibly generous of you." "It's not generosity," Mr. Kim replied, looking at Alex with respect. "It's an investment in something beautiful. Music like what I just heard shouldn't be limited by circumstances." As the evening continued, more and more people approached Lisa and Alex with offers of help. Someone offered to provide transportation to lessons. Another person mentioned knowing about scholarship programs for gifted young musicians. A local newspaper reporter, who had come to cover the community event, asked if she could write a story about Alex's remarkable performance. The most touching moment came when Frank, the elderly pianist, returned to the group carrying something in his hands. "Alex," he said, presenting the boy with a small, leather-bound book. "These are my grandmother's sheet music books. She taught me to play when I was about your age. I think she would have wanted you to have them." Alex accepted the precious gift with wide eyes, carefully opening the cover to see pages and pages of musical notes. "Are you sure, Mr. Frank?" "I'm positive, son. Music is meant to be passed down from one generation to the next. You're going to do amazing things with your talent." As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Alex sat back down at the piano. This time he wasn't nervous at all. He felt like he had found a part of himself that he never knew existed, and more importantly, he had discovered that his gift could bring joy to other people. With everything that had happened that night, Alex's life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine yet. 3 weeks after that magical evening at the community center, Alex's life had transformed in ways that still felt like a dream. He sat at the donated keyboard in their new apartment, practicing the scales that Dr. Rodriguez had taught him during his first official piano lesson. The morning sunlight streamed through windows that actually belonged to them now, not just temporarily, but as their real home. The apartment wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room where the keyboard had found its perfect spot near the window. Lisa had cried the day they moved in, not from sadness this time, but from overwhelming gratitude and disbelief that their circumstances had changed so dramatically. The story of Alex's performance had spread far beyond that small community gathering. Rita's husband worked for the local newspaper, and after hearing her emotional account of that evening, he had convinced his editor to run a feature story about the homeless boy with the extraordinary musical gift. The article, titled 12-Year-Old's First Piano Performance Moves Community to Tears, had touched readers throughout the city. Within days of the story's publication, Alex's phone number was ringing constantly. Well, it wasn't actually his phone number since they couldn't afford a phone, but Mrs. Davies had volunteered to field calls at the community center. Music teachers were calling to offer lessons. Local businesses wanted to donate instruments and supplies. Most surprisingly, a local family foundation had reached out with an offer that changed everything. The Henderson Family Foundation, established by a wealthy businessman who had grown up in poverty himself, specialized in helping families transition out of homelessness. After reading Alex's story, they had contacted Lisa with an offer to help her family get back on their feet. They provided the security deposit and first 3 months' rent for a modest apartment, along with assistance in finding Lisa a better-paying job with more stable hours. "It's not charity," the foundation representative had explained to Lisa during their first meeting. "It's an investment in a family that clearly has something special to offer the world. We believe in giving people the tools they need to build their own success. Lisa had been hesitant at first, worried about accepting such generosity, but Mrs. Davies had helped her understand that sometimes saying yes to help is the bravest thing you can do. Your son's gift was meant to be shared, Mrs. Davies had told her. This is just the beginning of that journey. Alex's piano lessons with Dr. Rodriguez had become the highlight of his week. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he would walk to her small studio apartment where an old but well-maintained upright piano waited for him. Dr. Rodriguez had been teaching for years, but she had never had a student quite like Alex. He learns faster than should be possible, she had told her colleagues at the school where she taught. I show him something once, and he not only understands it, but finds ways to make it more beautiful. It's like he's having conversations with the music. During their lessons, Alex was learning about scales and chords and proper finger techniques. But what amazed Dr. Rodriguez most was how he took these technical elements and immediately made them his own. When she taught him a simple exercise, he would add little melodic flourishes that turned the exercise into a piece of art. Alex, she said during one of their recent lessons, I want to enter you in the Regional Young Musicians Competition. It's still 6 months away, which gives us time to prepare, but I think you're ready for that level of challenge. Alex had looked up from the piano with wide eyes. A real competition? With other kids who have been playing for years? Yes, but here's what I want you to understand, Dr. Rodriguez had replied, sitting beside him on the piano bench. Those other kids might have more technical training, but they don't have what you have. You have something that can't be taught in lessons. You have the ability to make people feel something when you play. The idea of performing in a competition was both thrilling and terrifying. But Alex was learning to embrace challenges that once would have seemed impossible. The confidence he had gained from that first performance at the community center had grown stronger with each lesson and each small performance he had given since then. Word about Alex's talent had also reached the local television station. A producer had seen the newspaper article and wanted to do a follow-up story about how the community had rallied around the talented young musician. The TV segment, which aired on a Friday evening, brought even more attention to Alex's story. The most unexpected phone call came 3 days after the television story aired. Mrs. Davies had called Lisa at her new job, barely able to contain her excitement. Lisa, you need to sit down for this. The City Symphony Orchestra wants Alex to perform with them at their next community outreach concert. Lisa had nearly dropped the phone. The City Symphony Orchestra was world famous, and the idea that they wanted her 12-year-old son to perform with them seemed impossible. But it was real, and it was happening in just 6 weeks. They want him to play one of his own compositions, Mrs. Davies had explained. The conductor heard about Alex's gift for improvisation and wants to showcase that talent alongside the orchestra. Alex was in his bedroom practicing when Lisa came home with the news. She found him at the keyboard, working on a new melody that seemed to capture the feeling of hope mixed with gratitude. When she told him about the symphony's invitation, he stopped playing and turned to look at her with an expression of pure amazement. Mom? Are you serious? The real symphony wants me to play with them. They do, sweetheart. And they want you to compose something original for the performance. Alex turned back to the keyboard and played a few notes of the melody he had been working on. I think I might already be working on it, he said with a smile that lit up his entire face. The weeks that followed were filled with intense preparation. Dr. Rodriguez worked with Alex to refine his composition and help him prepare for the unique experience of performing with a full orchestra. She also connected him with other music teachers who could help him understand how his piano part would fit with the symphony's instruments. Meanwhile, the community that had first discovered Alex's talent continued to support him in countless ways. Mr. Kim from the music store had become a regular visitor, bringing sheet music and small accessories that helped Alex in his practice. Frank, the elderly pianist who had given Alex his grandmother's music books, stopped by once a week to share stories about great composers and to listen to Alex's progress. The most touching support came from the other families at the community center. Children who had watched Alex practice during after-school programs became his biggest fans, asking him to play their favorite songs and bringing friends to hear his music. Their enthusiasm reminded Alex that music was meant to be shared and enjoyed, not just studied and perfected. As the date of the symphony performance approached, Alex felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement that was becoming familiar to him. But this time, the nervousness was different. He wasn't worried about whether he could play the piano anymore. He had proven that to himself and to everyone else. Instead, he was excited about the opportunity to share his gift with an even larger audience. On the night before the symphony concert, Alex sat at his keyboard in the apartment that had become home, playing the composition he had written for the performance. The piece told the story of his journey from that quiet corner of the community center to this moment of incredible opportunity. It spoke of dreams that seemed impossible until the right moment arrived, of communities that lift each other up, and of the power of music to change lives in ways that nothing else can. Lisa sat on the couch nearby, listening to her son practice and reflecting on how drastically their lives had changed. Just a few months ago, they were moving from shelter to shelter, wondering if they would ever have stability again. Now her son was preparing to perform with one of the world's most respected orchestras. Tomorrow, Alex would take the stage in front of 2,000 people. But tonight, he was just a boy at his piano, making music and preparing to share his gift with the world.